Come on, next one.
And the thing I'm doing is I could do it all the same time.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Bonita Springs Fire Control and Rescue District regular board meeting December 7th, 2015 to order. Please rise for the invocation by Chaplain Chitwood, followed by the pledge.
I'd like a moment of silence for 4 fallen firemen this past month, and then we'll pray. Dear God, we are thankful for those who have faithfully served in so many ways. And for these families, Lord, that have lost a loved one of the firemen over these past month, I pray that you will be with those families, that you will strengthen them. We thank you for the faithfulness of these firemen and their service. And Lord, tonight we come and we ask for your grace and your wisdom and your presence in this meeting. We thank you for those that are being promoted and their faithfulness. Pray that you'll watch over them as they continue to serve in a very important way. Lord, we thank you for our country, and we pray for your protection and for your blessing. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any public comment on agenda items this evening? Seeing none, hearing none. Need a motion for the approval of November 9th, 2015 regular board meeting minutes.
I so move.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Need one motion for financials, November 2015 and current expenditures and ACH payments, acknowledgement of financial report, and acknowledgement of wire transfers and transfers between accounts.
I so move.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to move the presentations from item number 9 up to number 7 so that we can move the process along here a little easier. Maybe you don't all want to sit through the whole meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to the chief to do the presentations.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and Honorable Commission. I wanted to start by saying here in Bonita Springs we have a tradition of excellence, and becoming an officer in the fire district of Bonita Springs is a big deal. I know when I became a lieutenant, it was probably the biggest promotion of my life. And a lot of these men and women, as you see, standing in the back, are here to support some of their crew members that are being promoted in lieu of some retirements that have happened. So I'm going to mention some names of who's being promoted at this time. First, in place of Battalion Chief Todd Taylor, I would like to recognize the new Battalion Chief, Winthrop Telford. Winthrop Telford completed an arduous task that included 3 final contestants for the Battalion Chief job. All 3 were outstanding candidates, all highly qualified, and it was a very difficult decision. With that being said, Winthrop Telford has shown through his career that he has the ability, the leadership, the professionalism, and the technical expertise and the support of the troops that he's going to lead to become the next battalion chief. So Winthrop, if you wouldn't mind coming up front. You'd like to have your wife come up?
Get rid of metal.
Italian Chief Telford had some firefighters come from other parts of the state to enjoy this occasion with him. If you'd raise your hand just to recognize you for their service. Next, I'd like to talk about the training captain position, which will be vacated by Captain Paul Phillips. That's going to be for another celebration. But and in his place, Captain Eric Madden has been promoted to training captain. Captain Madden is another outstanding employee that we have, and who has been nothing short of extraordinary in his duty and time as a lieutenant, and has shown his ability to lead and train our men in the direction that we need to go. So Captain Madden, if you'd like to stand up front. I think most of you know Captain Madden, so without any further introduction. And thirdly, I'd like to recognize 3 lieutenants that are being promoted. Now, the lieutenant position on the fire department is the ones that, where the rubber meets the road. Those are the first people that our citizens see in their gravest times of emergency. That is the basis of the leadership we have here in this district. And we recognize our excellence in our frontline officers. That's how we grade our excellence in our service. So I would like to congratulate Lieutenant Andy Chikas, Mike Mendez, and Tommy Harrison. They are the 3 new lieutenants for the Bonita Springs Fire Control and Rescue District. Gentlemen, congratulations. Whoever's penning these new lieutenants, please come up front.
Anybody that needs to be excused, it's okay if you leave now. You're welcome to stay, but anybody that needs to go, take a couple of minutes here. Thank you all for coming. I would assume that would be the case, but I don't know. The next item on the agenda is disposition of assets. It's in your packet. You need
If I
a
may,
mo-
sir, would you like to do the CRS computer security presentation, or
Are we ready to do that? Sure.
whenever you're ready? I'd like to introduce Mr. Bill Lehman, who is our consultant from CRS. He'll take the podium and answer any questions. And just as a prelude, Bill's been working here for us, and CRS has been, I guess, employed with us for, how long is it, Greg? About 18 years, 12, 18 years? Yeah.
CRS is, servicing the district now for about 10 years. I've been directly involved now for about 18 months at this point.
Yeah. So if you would, Bill, just go through the protections in our systems and how we run our security system here.
So I guess the biggest question is, how do you protect the assets, within the district? Obviously, we use different layers of protection, what they call defense in depth. Our major defense is the security appliances that we have in place. Some people will call them a router. What we have in place here is beyond just a typical router, routing traffic in and out. We have sonic walls put in place here. A couple of things that the sonic walls provide the district over a typical router is it provides intrusion protection, which means that the router is actually looking for traffic that's coming in and out that has abnormal signatures, that someone's trying to get into your network. And in that case, it will actually alert us to that being taking place. It also is going to also protect against any type of malware, spyware, things that you hear that you would get on your home PCs. It's looking for what's actually coming in also. One of the other things that I do like about the sonic walls that it provides is content filtering. So what that means is we can actually filter the type of content that we allow to come into it. So in that case, obviously, some of the major things that we're going to block obviously things such as pornography. You can stop social websites. You can stop different categories that come into it. Obviously, we have going over with the district what they want to block. We have provided that. Also, another layer of protection is obviously everyone's going to have antivirus sitting on their desktops. So if something does actually gets to somebody's actual desktop, we have another layer of protection also. The important things to know about these levels of protection that we do have, they're dynamic. And what I mean by that is we pay a subscription base to SonicWall. Not only does it cover their hardware, but it also covers basically us getting updates. So SonicWall actually has what they call a global security team that works 24/7. As they see new threats that are put out onto the internet, they actually create what they call definitions. Those definitions are actually automatically pushed to our security device. And it could be once a day, could be twice a day, could be 5 times a day. Whatever that they deem necessary to block on these security appliances, they're also applying to us. That also takes place with the antivirus. So with the vendor that we work with, the antivirus, they provide the same level of protection. Does the board have any questions? Absolutely.
I do have a question. This
little tablet here,
Mhm.
is that covered by the same system?
Are you on the Wi-Fi here?
Yes. Yes, currently, yes.
Then actually you are going through the sonic wall, so the traffic is
When I'm not
actually-
on the Wi-Fi here and I'm at home, is it still covered? Then
Nope.
it's not. Thank you.
No,
How do you stop, or how do you defend against an email that's acceptable to come through, but there's a problem with the attachment? When you open the attachment, you get how do you protect against that, or is there any way to protect against that?
there is, and here we actually use a third party to actually parse all the email that comes in and out of here. Typically, when you send one organization an email, a lot of times that email is going from the sender directly to the receiver. We actually have a third-party company called AppRiver that all the email goes through them. They do a fantastic job with stopping spam and viruses. Is there something that's going to get through potentially? Absolutely. So what I've always told all our clients, and best defense on that, or one of the things, is educating the end users. If it's somebody from you that you don't know, don't open it. If it's, one of the ones you see now is, here's your receipt for a package just recently sent out. Well, if you didn't send out a package and so forth, then, don't be opening it. Plus, I always tell people probably shouldn't be using one of your business accounts to actually for non-business purposes. But is anything 100% perfect? No. It actually takes the technology and the people and having the proper processes in place to be able to give you the best type of defense that you're going to want.
So, maybe you don't know the answer to this off the top of your head, but you say that you guys monitor this on a daily basis. How many times do we get hit? I mean, or attempts made? Do we know that, or is that just?
We get notified of it. I don't have a report right in front of me.
Is it a significant number, or
No.
is it? Okay.
No. Have you been hit by the crypto?
Yes.
I know that
Yeah.
was a question that was brought up.
Right.
Yes, you have. And that's actually a nasty virus. If anyone understands what it does, it actually encrypts the data that you have. Now, the biggest part with that is, as viruses come out, malware comes out, you have vendors who are protecting it, such as Sonic Wall, such as other vendors that we use. But as those programs migrate or change, there's that point in time where the vendors are actually trying to catch up to figure out how to stop it. And that's one of your security gaps. It's typically what you would refer to as a zero-day vulnerability, because it's out there, but we just haven't figured out how to stop it. And it could take a day or two to actually get it. And that's why it's important that we work with security vendors that actually do dynamic updates, such as Sonic Wall and our AV vendor.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions?
If I happen to get something on this tablet and I bring it here, is it possible that it spreads anywhere?
Are you getting on to our Wi-Fi or
At home, at home Wi-Fi.
at home, and you're getting on the public Wi-Fi, or you're actually getting? I don't believe you actually get on to the corporate network, so
No.
it would not infiltrate our network.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Need a motion for the disposition of assets report. It's in the packet. I don't know if anybody's looked at it.
So move. I'll second.
Do we have any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner's business. Commissioner Castillo.
I just have a question for the chief. How do we stand on the progress with the new station? Anything going on with that at this point in time?
Yes, I would defer to Fire Marshal Fernandez. We have made some progress with the engineering and the irrigation system at this time, as I was briefed this morning, but I think the Fire Marshal can get a little more in depth.
Yes, I received 3 proposals that I have gone through and had them all look at each one of them. and I'm waiting on the architect to get back with his proposal, make sure it's all right. The landscape architect, he has one item he needs to take out of the proposal, and that was for the permit fee through Swift Mud and everything. One of the things we agreed with Lennar Homes is that we're going to share the non-potable water from their lake and everything, help irrigate the station, so that's why we don't need that permit from Swift Mud. Today I met with the engineer that's doing the site design. We went to Station 2 and Station 5 to see what we had there. And he got a good idea. He took pictures, so when he designs our site, he's going to make sure it's something feasible for our needs. I know beginning of the year, all the mechanicals and everything is going to design for the station, the new things that we're looking for that's to today's code and LED and stuff like that. We're trying to improve upon, make it a better station than what we have already, less maintenance. And that's where we're at right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Forbes?
The only thing I've noticed on the news lately is there's a lot of innovations of robots being used in fire protection, firefighting, all that. I just want to make sure that we were looking into that and seeing if there's any place we need to investigate using something like that.
I would have to look into that a little more. I'm not really familiar about the robotics for the
Yeah.
fire department.
They got a whole bunch of them now.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Murphy?
Chief, do we have a picture of that fundraiser that we can pull up? There it is.
How's that?
That's pretty darn good. I'd like to explain what this is. On October 18th, at Pelican's Nest Golf Course, there's a fundraiser for Golisano Children's Hospital. They invited all the managers from all the clubs around the state to come to it, and it was titled Superheroes. You can see Batman, you can see Spider-Man, and there's other heroes in there, and then there's firefighters that are heroes in there also. The 5 children are all cancer survivors. And it was a real moving thing. They raised $250,000 for the hospital. Thank you, everyone that participated, and thank you, Chief, for allowing that to happen. 1 ladder truck, 1 engine, 6 men.
I'll add to that at Pelican Nest Golf Club, the food and beverage manager there came to me and said that she had never seen more professionalism from one group of guys in her entire career. So that's kudos to the guys that were there that day, because she said that the fire department should be very proud of the guys that were on that detail.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner McCourt? I'm fine too. Under new business, we need to approve an interlocal agreement relating to the collection and disbursement of fire impact fees with the city of beautiful Bonita Springs.
Also move.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Proposed resolution to amend the general employees retirement system. We'll take a motion for this, and then a second, and then we can discuss.
Also move.
I'll second it.
Now, any discussion? Who wants to, you get something?
Well, to me, at this point in time, this seems to be something that should have been discussed during our budget and negotiations. I don't feel it's proper at this time for it to be brought up and passed at this time. I just don't feel comfortable with it.
Would you like some background on this? A little
I
bit
would.
more
Well,
background.
maybe for the public, some
Okay.
background would be necessary.
The background is that the general employees have a separate pension fund and pension system from the firefighters. They have a board with members that are selected, a member that's selected by the board, and other members that are selected through the bylaws process, through the process of creating this. Now, when this was brought to the board, the first order of business was to bring the pension system up to snuff with the IRS or the Internal Revenue Code. So the first half that you see in the corrections of the update are specifically pointed to the code. The second half was that the membership or the board elected to bring in front of this board the addition of the longevity payment into their pension system. With that being said, the employees now put in 7%, the same as the firefighters. The firefighters have their longevity included in their pensionable salary.
But that was part of a negotiation for the stop-start of the insurance premiums.
Yes.
Mr.
and-
Chairman, could I make an amendment to the motion to divide this into two categories, one with the IRS corrections and the other with whether or not we'll discuss any kind of changes to the pay amount?
Well, let's, we've got a motion on the floor here, and then we'll do another motion after this.
You want it separate rather than just amend it?
Well, let's see how we do on this one first before
Let me,
we amend the motion.
If I could, just finish this, because basically, when we did that amendment back, when we made the changes, all employees were asked to put in 7% in return to get their longevity put in from the firefighter standpoint. Now, the general employees put in 7% too, and their longevity was not included in their pension. Now, the way this works is the board can either vote this up or down, and it is not specifically part of a negotiation process because it's not in their contract. However, should the board decide that that's the way they would like to move ahead with this proposal, you can certainly accept it or defer it to a later date while accepting the IRS code. That is possible. I spoke with the attorney. He said, as Commissioner Murphy adequately put out, that you can split the two and not or approve one or the other.
It's my understanding the contract expires in July, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm of the mind that any changes to a labor contract should not be done randomly. We're under a contract, and to change a contract, it should be done at the time that the new contract is negotiated. The housekeeping issues and the things that IRS has to change and all of that, I understand we have to do that, and to go in compliance doesn't cost us any more. If it does, we can't do anything about it. But from where I sit, to change any kind of labor contract in midterm or any point during the contract would be no different than if we tried to go back to the staff and say we wanted to take something away. Even if it was something insignificant, there would be significant pushback. And I'm pushing back on this because I feel that this isn't the time or the place to change any kind of benefit. And I know the pension is not part of the contract, but it is part of give and take in negotiations. And I'm not going to support this.
I just wanted to elaborate on what the commissioner said, Commissioner Lohan, Chairman. There are 5 employees that are not part of the labor contract. So that's what I believe what he's saying is that.
I would rather not divide them up. I'd rather see it all happen at the same time, rather
Sure.
than split that out. I would still feel like perhaps I should withdraw my motion and make a new motion that we divide this up in between the IRS regulations, and I'll take just that portion to make a motion to approve that.
Commissioner McCourt, you have any comments on this, any feelings?
We need a second to this motion.
Okay.
We need a second.
All right. Somebody
I'll second it.
All right, Commissioner Forbes, second. Okay.
Excuse me. Did I miss something here? I don't remember seeing this in print. Did we get a copy of this proposal?
Yes, sir.
Then I apologize. I didn't. Did it come with the agenda this time?
Yes, sir. It was sent out in the board
There's a whole
packet.
big packet, too. There's a lot of pages to
It
it.
must have been way down at the bottom because I didn't get a chance to see it. So I'm going to pass.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to, I understand, to do
The
the...
IRS part.
Right,
Can I
approve the-
clarify that?
Yes.
Okay.
You may.
So the motion is to separate the proposal into 2 portions. One, to approve the IRS code, and the second, to vote on the longevity issue and the pension benefit in a separate motion.
Okay, yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Could we take the first vote?
Yeah, let's
motion?
do a roll call vote. Commissioner Casella,
For the IRS changes, I vote aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Forbes, Commissioner Murphy?
Aye.
Commissioner McCord?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Lohan's and I.
Now I'd make a motion that we consider a vote for the increase with the pension plan for the 11 employees.
Need a second to that motion? Somebody's got to second it to bring it to a vote, or we don't
Or it
have to,
dies.
or it dies.
Dies for lack of second if not.
All right, dies to a lack of a second.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We need to approve the 2016 board meeting dates. They're in your packet. I've reviewed them. I hope everybody else has. I don't see a problem. Need a motion to accept the dates.
I'll move to accept the dates.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Now we move on to Chief Joe Daigle and his report.
Thank you. I'd like to start with, the board asked me to come back with an evaluation of our operations as they relate to NFPA 1710 standards and also what we do here in Bonita Springs Fire Control and Rescue District. I would like to mention that the Bonita Springs Fire Control and Rescue District was created by the public and is memorialized in the state statutes to provide fire control and rescue services, which include water rescue, extrication, trench rescue are the words that the state had actually put in the resolution on Chapter 191. So I'd like to start with when we talked to, there was some, where do we stand today? When we look back at the year of 2013, which actually marked the 40th anniversary of America Burning, as Commissioner McCord had mentioned before, we wanted to look at where we are in regards to today's modern day fire control and rescue district. So one of the first things we look at is how, and I'm referencing an article called Replace Big Apparatus for Better Fire Service EMS Resource Deployment, which comes from GEMS, which is one of the most notable EMS magazines or professional journals. So when they talk about size matters, in relation to fire engines versus light rescues or rapid response vehicle deployment. So the revelation inside Burning Americas was that how did the fire department respond, not specifically for all the deaths in the fire service, but for the way we provide EMS. Now that was, they said that we need to look at the way we deploy EMS resources as a fire department. And one of the main issues that they talked about was responding in smaller apparatus. So a few organizations embraced this challenge and introduced the new and unique response models for EMS delivery. The increase in demand for organizational efficiency was the transition from a full-size apparatus to a smaller rapid response vehicles. And some vehicles approached this, or some departments approached this and determined how can we do that. Now, there were some examples of this that were given in the article. And one of the things was downsizing or right-sizing. What do we call right-sizing and downsizing? Now, the right resource to the right place and the right time was a paradigm that had become the key concept for the deployment of fire EMS response resources. And in all this, they actually, this article was in 2014, which is the most recent evaluation of the systems. They came up with a few examples of what a modern day fire department looks like. What is the example of the people who followed in line, who did what America's Burning came out to recognize as the appropriate response. And one department that they used was the city of Grand Rapids. Now, they used the recent department trend considered the right sizing. Now, I did a little evaluation if we shut the lights down. So Grand Rapids has 11 stations. They run 21,000 calls, 21,400, 14,000 approximately are medical. So this is one of the examples that they use. Now, I don't know how clear this is. We might be able to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So they have 11 stations. Now, if you go up a little bit, Greg, I want to read that one caption where it says, "Note, not all frontline machines are staffed on a daily basis. Staffing depends on daily manpower and availability. There is one machine with pumping capabilities in service with 3 firefighters at each station daily." So if we go down, you'll see there's a platform, which is a ladder truck, an engine, and then go down a little bit. You have your special response vehicles on the right, well, my right, and then a medic unit, which is a ALS rapid response vehicle. The next station, they have an engine front line. Next station, engine front line. Next station, engine front line. Next station, an engine and a medic unit front line. Next station, a ladder truck and an engine front line. And that's a battalion chief car there. I'm not counting the hazmat stuff. Ladder, engine front line, medic car, engine, they call it a rescue, but it's an engine pumping apparatus, and a medic 7. Ladder truck, engine, medic 1. Engine, well, they call it a rescue, but that's an engine with a battalion chief. Okay, so this is 11 stations. So what they did was they have 4 medic rapid response vehicles, they have 4 ladder companies, and every station has an engine. So when we talk about downsizing, what they did was they replaced the engine apparatus with a light rescue vehicle. But obviously they still have their main function, which they are designed for, is for fire department operations. And when staffing goes down, they do not staff the medical engine, the medical rescues, simply because they have to be able to respond to all the calls that come in. Now, all their engines are staffed with paramedics, just like, basically, it's essentially the same thing we do. Now, they run 21,000 calls a year out of 11 stations. So that's close to 3 times as many as we do. So that's one example of how Grand Rapids used it. So when we look at it, I said the issue of whether a department should institute right sizing through the use of smaller response vehicles, that's what we have done here. In fact, when we had 3 rescues, we were more in line with the overlay. When I say overlay, that's an overlay of rapid response vehicles or light rescue vehicles. What we did is we could not afford the personnel to keep that running. And our call load wasn't enough for each station to warrant the addition of the staffing for those light rescue vehicles. Another department was, and I'm using these as an examples because this is a very good illustration. Tualatin Valley Fire Rescue, which is out of Portland, Oregon. They have 21 stations and run 30,000 calls a year. Now, this is what would be considered the state-of-the-art modern-day fire department according to what America's Burning was referencing. And that's what they were looking at, doing a review of the 40-year anniversary. They have 21 stations, 30,000 calls, and they have four rapid response vehicles. Now, what they do, and they have an engine at each station, is they have what we'll call peak load staffing. They have these 4 calls which are staffed with 1 person, and that is between 7 a.m. and 5 a.m., Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
5 a.m. or p.m.?
p.m. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Now, all these one-man rescues are located in stations with other fire apparatus. Now, the reason why they did this is because they were finding that they were running so many non-emergency calls and general help calls that it was keeping the fire department in service on calls that did not need 3 to 4 people. So they implemented this one-man car response model. Now I would suggest that if we ever came to a point where we were running that many calls and were overwhelmed with non-emergency calls, I would suggest that this would be something to look at. But we're not overwhelmed with non-emergency calls that are taking away from our ability to respond with just the engine. Now, that is important because there's a breakover point. Like Station 1, we have a light rescue. We run approximately 1,700 calls a year out of that point. Now, what happens is when the engine goes out or the light rescue goes out, you have to be ready for the next call. Now, what we try to do is we try to send the right vehicle to that call so it doesn't tie up the engine for something unnecessary that may not need an engine at that point in time. Now, if we were to try to adjust the staffing, let's say for an example at this station, we tried to adjust the staffing and say, okay, we're going to put a rapid response vehicle here. We would be pulling people off of the engine and creating a situation where we are not capable of responding to the emergencies that happen in this district. We may be capable of responding to a few emergencies, but not all the emergencies. When I say a few, 60% maybe at the most. So a constant question comes up also is, why does the fire truck go with the ambulance? When we pull out of here and you see an ambulance and a fire truck, the reason why they are going to that call is not because they want to run that call. They're going to that call because they need the staffing. Now, if they had more staffing on an ambulance and were responding to a medical call that could basically handle whatever type of call was, we would only send the ambulance or we would only send the fire truck. But based on the information that dispatch is receiving, they are determining who goes on that call. Now, they don't say, is it a fire engine or an ambulance? They say, how many people, how many professionals do we need to mitigate this call? That's how that's determined. We don't determine that. That is strictly determined by the dispatch center when they are talking on the phone with the person who is having difficulty breathing. Now, they could send 2 ambulances, but we only have 2 ambulances in Bonita. So that would only leave us with 1 or half, however you want to look at it. So, and the same situation happens, let's say, for example, at Station 2. Station 2, we have an engine there. Now, if we say we get a breathing difficulty in Station 2's zone, and we only send an ambulance, that ambulance may take 10, 15 minutes, we don't know. Now, how many fire stations does that have to pass to get to that call? Well, by law, if we get a call, a medical call, being an ALS agency, we have to respond to that being the closest available unit. And the last thing you want to happen is something to happen, and I get a call saying, why did the ambulance have to pass 3 fire trucks staffed with paramedics on them to mitigate my issue? Now, the other option would be, okay, we get a light rescue, for example, and we have an engine, and we jump the staff between each one. Now you have an additional vehicle that is only capable of responding to a certain amount of calls, and you completely decommissioned the engine from responding because we don't respond to any emergency with 1 person. We don't go to any emergency with 1 person if it's an emergency, you know. But now that engine is incapable of responding to any calls. First of all, you have a driver who can't run the computer, who's not getting the information, who you don't want driving, talking to dispatch, or you don't want driving, running the computer, trying to figure out where he's going. So you at minimum would need 2, and you would deplete the ability, and you couldn't even do that because now you only have, you're responding to any emergency with only 2 people, which is not appropriate, especially fires or hazmats or anything else. And like I said, most emergencies, ALS emergencies, cannot be handled by 2 people, or else we wouldn't be responding because there's 2 people on the ambulance now. So that's Tualatin County, and they're considered a very modern fire department.
So I have a question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
in order for light rescues to work, it would be an increase in staffing, and you'd still have to have the engine in service, and it would cost us a lot more money to put more light rescue like we did before. But in order to not take people off of a truck to put them on a light rescue, we'd have to staff the light rescues as well, which would be counterproductive because the way I see it, the engine can handle every call, and a light rescue can only handle, you said 60% or whatever. So it makes sense to send the vehicle that can handle every call no matter what it is, unless you've got a lot of money and resources to have a light rescue. It makes sense to send the engine.
Well, and I think a very valuable point, sir, and like you very aptly made, the very valuable point is here is when we're responding to a call, are we concerned, what are we concerned with? To me, I'm concerned with providing the best treatment that I possibly can, that we possibly can in any circumstance. So now, there may be an optics issue with the light rescue going or an engine going, but the point of the matter is that vehicle has the tools necessary to handle all the jobs that happen within that zone, whatever it is. Decreasing that is decreasing the toolbox that the employees or the firefighters have to be able to handle it. Now, like I said, we do it at Station 1, and we've done it in the past when we had the light rescues. If, in fact, we received a point of impact where that call load, 30,000 calls a year, for example, expanded to that great of a length, then you could handle adding an overlay of a light rescue or a one-man unit should they be able to handle all non-emergency calls. You know, now we don't run enough non-emergency calls to put people on staff that can run to that. I mean, we just don't. Or else we wouldn't be sending the engine on every truck. But the calls that we do run where the engine is going, it's an obvious emergency. We may not know it until we get there, but the caller on the line is telling the dispatch they're having an emergency. And they have a medical priority dispatching, which is a specifically designed to ask the questions to determine over years of scientific evidence, doctors for fire professionals, paramedic professionals, that determine the questions and how they answer. Are you having chest pain? Are you having breathing difficulty? Which determines the amount of resources you need to get an appropriate level of service. Now, for example, Detroit, Michigan does something where they were having a big problem with ambulances taking 25 minutes, 30 minutes getting to medical calls. And they would pull up, and you know who you'd see on scene? Nobody. There's a fire department 5 blocks away, but they didn't respond because they were not up to the modern day standards. They're not trained. In some cases, they're not trained or ready, or the culture has not accepted that firefighters will be running medical calls.
Well, isn't it safe to say the protocol with dispatch, I can't speak for anywhere other than here because it's the only one I have any experience with, but the protocol for dispatch, in my humble opinion, is that they'll send, sometimes if they're not sure, send more than they need, and it's easier to turn them around than to get to the scene and realize that you need more.
Well, that's true, but what we do is we don't run to every call. A lot of times, if EMS arrives on scene before us, they cancel us. We cancel them. Like EMS will not run to elevator rescues. We do that. Lifting helps. Half the time they won't send EMS either. We'll just do the lifting help. So there's I wouldn't say a large amount, but a significant amount of calls where we do only send one unit. And usually it's us. Typically because we can handle anything that we run across that's a site, like elevator rescue where we have to open the elevator, we have a special key and things like that. But it's not uncommon for us to only send one unit to an emergency, should that be deemed appropriate by the dispatcher who's actually on the line with the person having the emergency.
Well, I've noticed that calls will come in, somebody's driving down 75 and sees a car go off the road. Now, the car might have gone off the road and not even gotten an accident, but somebody will call 911 and said that they just saw a wreck on 75. Well, dispatch is asking a question. Meanwhile, the guy's doing 70 miles an hour going the other way, and he has no idea what happened. So there's a lot of confusion sometimes with dispatch, so that they'll send a lot of people not knowing, and then a lot of times they'll be riding up and down the highway going, well, where is the guy? So,
right.
You know, but I guess you have to err on the side of caution, because if it is a bad wreck or rollover or an entrapment, you have to have the equipment there.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that leads into Also, another fire department that I did want to talk about was Tulsa. Tulsa basically implemented the same thing. The Tulsa today responds EMS requests for service in smaller squad vehicles from 5 of its 30 stations. Okay, that's 5 of the 30 stations, so that's 1 per every 6 stations. We do that now. And all these departments, well, specifically to Lawton County, 4 every 21 stations. So that's basically that's 1 for every 5 stations. Light rescue, actually, that's a non-emergency response car, a non-emergency. I did want to mention also that Tulsa does respond in ALS rapid response vehicles, but what's important is all the Tulsa squad units, which are the rapid response vehicles, are all stationed alongside Quints, ladder, engines, or combination apparatus. And in fact, they send 3 apparatus on many of their calls. They'll send a squad, they'll send an ambulance, and they'll send an engine because they don't want to take the engine out of service. They're just there to mitigate the issue, and they'll send 1 person in the squad, like we do, into the ambulance for support for EMS because they don't have enough people for critical patients to care for the patients. So these are some fire departments that I found that is considered the modern, most new way of responding. And I would submit that the best way that we could get better at what we do is to have our own ambulances and determine how many we have. And we know where that is right now. But
Who knew?
yeah. But after evaluating this, that's what I found. Now, when we talk about MPDS, that's the medical priority dispatching, which determines who goes to what call. I would recommend, if anybody has not or has been to the dispatch center, go take a look at how they determine what vehicles are going to what calls. It's really state of the art. And another, and I've talked about this before, but it would suffice it to speak again. We've also demonstrated that the predictable software that they use is also being used by the county. And I wanted to point out this too, because I asked Lead Control, Tina Taviano, about this. She's the chief of control. Said, how in fact are they using Siren Predict, the predictable software? She said, well, when they started using it, what would happen was it would leave entire zones empty, entire zones. So now they have a minimum acceptable coverage, which is the minimum amount that they will have, ambulances they'll have. For example, in Bonita Springs, the minimum ambulances they may have is 1. So when the whole county gets blown out, they won't use the Siren Predict, which will predict to move everybody out of the South County up into the middle of the county. They have a protocol in place where they cannot send ambulances, all the ambulances, out of Bonita Springs. So that was written into it. And additionally, we do that with fire resources also countywide. We have, like here in Bonita, we have a minimal acceptable coverage. Let's say, we have a big fire and all of our resources are dumped into this fire. They'll send 3 units down because that's our minimal acceptable coverage for fire. And all the other fire departments will all send engines, like in kind, for mutual aid, or, mutual aid to cover for us. So that all goes together with the systems that we're talking about. So I want to make that clear. Does the board understand what a peak load staffing scenario would look like, which would only refer to not closing stations down, unless the board would entertain the thought of actually closing a station, then because at our minimum staffing is where we are at all of our stations except for Station 1, where we have a rescue. But that's what peak load staffing would be exactly what Tualatin County does with adding the extra 1-man company during those really busy hours. The predictable software, I think we demonstrated how the predictable software works. I think we've shown how medical priority dispatch works. And there was one more thing I wanted to address, which was the 8-hour shift scenario. And some of the commissioners who've been on the board for a while, actually, the chairman said, didn't you do this a few years ago? And we did, but it warrants bringing it up again. We did an evaluation of 8-hour shifts. And what we came up with was there is 168 total hours in a work week, that's 24/7, with 25 firefighters on duty per shift, which is required to comply with NFPA 1710. If the Bonita Springs District went to an 8-hour shift, we would have to add an additional 50 employees to maintain the same level of service. We would work 3 8-hour shifts for 5 days, which would equal 40 hours each, or 120 total hours, 8 times 3 times 5. This leaves 48 hours for the last 2 days of the week, which is Saturday and Sunday, which could use 4 12-hour shifts, 2 12-hour shifts for each day. This requires 2 shifts of 25 firefighters each, or 50 more personnel, for a total of 125 firefighters, which is 66% more firefighters than we currently employed would be needed to maintain the same level of coverage. Now, that's not taken into account if we wanted to reduce coverage. Now, 12-hour shifts would be a little bit more economical than 8-hour shifts. You could have 50 firefighters on 12-hour shifts per day for 496 hours.
Would we still, let me ask you a question. Where does the overtime law kick in? Because I know with our work schedule now where it kicks in, but if you went to 12-hour shifts, you would be paying overtime after
No.
40? You would
No.
not?
We
Okay,
do-
that's why I
firefighters
don't know
are
what the law
exempt.
is on that.
Yes, sir. What happens is we don't pay overtime until after 53 hours of work time.
Is that the same, if they went to 8-hour shifts, that wouldn't be true?
We would not pay overtime till over 53 hours for any firefighter. But what happens...
Even working a 40-hour week?
Even working a 40-hour work week.
If
That's
they work
correct.
more than 40 hours, even on a 5-day work
Yeah.
schedule, they would not be entitled to overtime?
They're not entitled to overtime.
That's interesting.
But the issue comes, you have to...
You never get anybody to work. You never get anybody to take the job. I'm shooting.
That's one of the issues that we ran into. The fire department is the only industry that allows that under the current FLSA model. For example, everybody that works 24/47 or 24/48 for Lee County EMS gets paid overtime after 40 hours. So, for example, if we were to keep the same level of service and go to a 40-hour work week, we would need 50 additional sets of bunker gear at $3,100 per set, which is $155,000. Times twice, that's $310,000. There's also a consideration that we currently pay our firefighters a starting salary of $15.61 an hour. Now they work a 56-hour work week average. That's 3 hours of time and a half because they work 56, so that's only 3 hours overtime. This equates to $46,000 about a year for 2,912 hours worked. If they worked a 40-hour week and their pay remained the same, they would make $32,000 a year for working 2,080 hours. Now, we would have some difficulty. We're having difficulty now finding qualified applicants, but we would really have difficulty filling any firefighter spots. It may be more efficient because it costs less for the firefighters for less hours, but we would have a difficult time retaining employees.
You'd have to add 50 more firefighters,
Yes.
which...
And all the
which
workman's
pension
comp,
and all
pensions,
perks and
those
so
types of things,
it's-
yeah.
it's-
Gear, equipment, medical, health coverage. So that's
That wouldn't make sense.
the economical analysis. Now, you could do it, but there's always a risk benefit for those scenarios. Now, if we were going to do a peak staffing scenario like Tualatin County does, I would say you hire firefighters to do that. And you could then put them maybe on a 12 or 8-hour shift, but even then we would have a difficult time from a historic perspective of keeping firefighters here. Because the first thing they're going to do is want to go somewhere that has a fire department.
If you went with a system like that, the pay would have to be a lot higher. Just a starting pay to be able to attract.
Well, I believe EMS, they went to the 12-hour shifts. They did.
But EMS pays overtime after 40.
Yes, they do. But what they did was the people that they moved to work less hours in the 12-hour shifts, they bumped their pay up to equal people working 24-hour shifts because nobody would take the job because it was a cut in pay. If you pay the same for less hours, you're
Right.
I don't see why you would have, it would be difficult to have people.
But it begs
want to
the
do that.
question, why, if firefighters are exempt from overtime, why wouldn't EMS be exempt?
There's, we could get into the specifics of the law, but it has to do with, I mean, Frank and Greg would know a lot more about those
Well,
laws.
just roughly, I mean, it's all emergency services, and if it falls under an IRS,
He was involved with a lot of this at the time.
Yeah, it falls underneath an IRS code called 207K exemption. Basically, what it says is there's a list of things that a person has to perform in order to be a certified firefighter. To get that, what's historically called the 7K exemption, where you would be paid after 53 hours and 3 hours of overtime. So EMS in 2006 or 8 took Lee County EMS to court, and essentially the employees won. They don't carry bunker gear historically. They're not certified firefighters. They don't perform extrications. They don't go into hazardous atmospheres, IDLH atmospheres. So those criteria weren't met by the EMS personnel, so they essentially won their case and says, all right, you're not a firefighter by the true definition and IRS definition. So therefore, at that point, you will be paid as a 40-hour
Okay.
regular employee throughout
Thank
the
you.
United States.
So I did want to wrap that up and make sure that the board completely understands what we're talking about here with all those issues, with peak load staffing, with the fact that we do use predictable software, meaning the county, that we do use medical priority dispatch. The most modern examples of these, and we did evaluate the 8-hour shifts, and we also looked at peak load staffing. Now, some of these things that are talked about, like the roving units, I could not find any fire department in the country that provides roving firefighting units. There are EMS units that do that, EMS departments, meaning private ambulance service, transport services, but nobody who qualifies for our mission, which is fire control and rescue services, as the state statute determines we are. So I'll entertain any questions about that.
Chief, I'd like to just say one thing. With the Bonita Leadership Group, we did a tour of the Emergency Operations Center in, I guess, Fort Myers. And I would recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen that operation, the 911 calls. You can stand there and watch and see what goes on and how they dispatch everything. It's a heck of an education. And you also get to see the helicopter rescue and the new ambulances that are so highly efficient and cost so much less. So I'd recommend that to anybody who hasn't seen that.
Any further questions? Okay. Next, I'd like to bring up the property located on Hickory Island, which is next to McLaughlin. Just wanted to confirm that the board received the documents and also understands what they are. I think Mr. Dennis Gilkey is here and who presented us with the documentation. First, I'd like to say that this property is located to the south of McLaughlin in the wooded area next to the CenturyLink building. Now, this proposal is a proposal to give the fire district more or less some land to build a fire station, a future fire station on the land in conjunction with another land development project. Did the board have a chance to review that and look at it, and do they understand do you understand what this means to our responses?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I toured that property with you, Chief. We looked it over carefully, looked at every other property we could find up and down Hickory Boulevard. It seems to be a very suitable site. I would think that we should go forward with something like this because it gives us the option for in the future getting a piece of that land right across the street from it in order to have water access. I don't see how this would hurt us, and if some future board decides that they don't want to do anything with that property, it reverts back to the owner.
Anybody else got any thoughts on this?
I'm just wondering what's the ramifications with the city and what the citizens in that area, what their thoughts are on that.
I have not done any community outreach or talked to anybody. I know that the city manager is aware of the situation, and I'm just bringing it to the board to make you aware that that is an option.
The question I had when I read the agreement over was mitigation costs would be shared, and I haven't seen any estimates of the mitigation cost, number one. Number two, this board has given you a direction, and we're in the middle of a long drawn-out process with CenturyLink, which has a boat dock, which is very important to dispatching any water rescues. And my understanding with this property is that there's water frontage there, but we would not have access to put a boat there or put a dock there. From where I sit, I think we need more information, number one, on how much mitigation costs are going to be. And secondly, it still doesn't solve our boat issue. And if it takes a year to get an answer from CenturyLink, from my understanding with other things, and we're quite a few months into that process, would the CenturyLink building with the boat dock serve the purposes that we need to run the 200 whatever plus calls that we run on Hickory Island? And I understand response times are awful, especially in season from running out of Station 2. I know we can't put an engine at CenturyLink building. I'm kind of at a quandary here, because the thing that I do like about the CenturyLink building is we can have the boat on a lift and be in the water in a couple of minutes instead of dragging it all the way to Carl Johnson Park and dropping it and then parking the truck and the trailer. We're adding 15 or 20 minutes to every MERT response. And if there's a way that we can have a piece of property that we could actually have our boat there, then I think we could justify doing something. But I just need to hear everybody else on the board's feedback, and yours as the chief, of where we stand. And it begs the question, how do the residents of Hickory Island feel about having a firehouse over there? I mean,
I'd like to just offer my response
I thought you'd never ask.
I
mean, that's the elephant in the room.
I'm going to just offer the response analysis and from outside of the community or the political aspect of this, and just offer a straight up response analysis. From that area, we meet our response goals at this time. Now that means Bonita Springs, I'm talking about the district-wide, we meet our response time goals. That being said, because it's 6 minutes or less 85% of the time.
No, but now that's the same argument the county used with us on ambulances, so
Well,
it doesn't
I'm
hold a lot
just
of
gonna
water
offer
with me. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So what that means is the calls that we run out to Hickory Island do not impact our ability at this point to meet the overall district goals. But that does not negate the fact that there is a 7-minute response time to that area on McLaughlin, which means that there's an 11-minute response time to the north end of Hickory Island. Now, if you were to ask me what I think should be out there, I would say, if I had the option, would be a fire station with an engine. Because that would mean that we're only capable of handling medical calls right now if we put a rescue out there. And we would not be able to be capable of handling the fire load. And we would not be capable of handling significant car accidents. And we would not be capable of, maybe capable of handling some of the water rescues. Now, suffice it to say that that is the professional case. I understand that there are other powers at work in this. But if you were going to ask me if I had a choice of what would provide the best public safety for that area, that is what it would be.
Is it not possible with this piece of property that Mr. Gilkey's talking about, is it absolutely out of the question that a boat dock could be put there?
Did you have questions for Mr. Gilkey?
What was the question?
The question was, is the fact that that piece of property that we're discussing is on the water. It goes deep enough to the bay. And my question was, is there any way possible, if we did something there, that we could put a dock out on the bay for the boat? And Mr. Gilkey says not on that piece of property, so.
Now,
I'm just
Yeah.
looking,
No.
if we're gonna solve
Yeah.
a problem down there, we've got to solve the whole problem, in my estimation. We don't have to piecemeal it, we have to solve the whole problem. Go ahead.
Number one, my feeling is that I don't have enough information if we were going to vote on this tonight, but I'm concerned about 3 or 4 things. Number one, Fire District has the unusual situation in Bonita Springs that you could damn near build a fire station on the water. If you put it on stilts and had a way to get the truck on the land, we could do it. That's protected resource, that's mangroves. It's, if we go ahead and would say we would put a fire station on that, you're going to have World War III.5 from Hickory Island. I don't think we should get the fire district involved in that. I think it would be wrong. I think if we need a fire station out there, if you can justify it, that we have sufficient funds to buy a site. It's going to cost us a lot more money, but I would far rather spend the money and get a site that would be proper, one that we'd have access for the boat dock, because Steve says that it's really important, and I agree with him, that we have that boat so it can be dropped in the water immediately and we get a rescue crew going. But I would, if it was put to a vote tonight, I'm not ready to vote because I want to really research all the zoning history of that property. I know there's been similar developments proposed in the past, but I just don't think that property's 4 or 5 feet below the road from where I was looking at it when I was out there with the chief. So that's my viewpoint.
Well, the problem that everybody faces is there's not much land out there that's available to do something like what that needs to be done.
Right.
I remember when I first came on the board a few years back, we tried to do something with the state in a joint venture out at Lover's Key. And at that point, it made kind of sense to, if you're going to worry about response times with the mutual aid at the south end of Fort Myers Beach and the north end of Hickory Island, or the north half of the island, we could probably meet all of the response times we needed there and have a boat dock. We'd probably be able, but the state shut us down, didn't want to have any discussion about it. There's different people here now, and there's different people making the decisions at the state level. I'm sure they have issues of where they're manning their rangers and manning their, or storing their equipment and things along those lines. And I think that it still begs the question that even if we split Hickory Island into 2 zones, Station 2 could still cover the south end, and some other type of substation or a place where we could have the boat. Even if the boat wasn't in the water, we'd be very, very close to the boat ramp. So, it would be, a a lot more insignificant of a response time problem, and it wouldn't bother anybody. I mean, even though it's, I know, environmentally sensitive land, but you reach a point where you have to provide service, emergency service for people, and to get out to Dog Beach or to get any of those places out there, the response times are ridiculously long. We had an incident recently where somebody got cut with a boat propeller. Okay, it had a good ending, but we were kind of lucky that it had a good ending. I mean, when somebody's bleeding that badly, and it doesn't sound like a long time, but if it takes 14 minutes to get there, you bleed for 14 minutes. See how long you last when you got a gash in your leg. So, I mean, it's not even the sheer volume of calls that we do, because we don't do that many, but you know what? Damn it, if it's somebody that I love, one's too many to lose because we couldn't get there in time. So these are the problems that we face as a board to make decisions that people maybe don't like, but we also have to be good enough neighbors to understand that we have to do this the right way. And I think we're walking into a minefield. And if we don't solve both problems with response times, like you said, you'd like to have an engine there. But if we don't solve the problem with an engine and a boat, we're still basically in the same situation. We've fixed part of our response time problems, and we've alienated 3/4 of the residents of Hickory Island by doing so, even though it might save one of their lives one day, but nobody's thinking about that because they don't need it right now while we're talking about it. But we're not solving the problem of if we need to drop the boat in the water, and that's where I'm having a real hard time with this.
I wanted to
Mr.
add a
Chairman?
little bit to this for 1 second.
Yes, sir.
In my mind, I think one of the first things we have to do is separate the problem from the property. I think we're going backwards here. We're reacting because somebody is offering us a gift, and we're saying, well, okay, then we ought to find a reason to use it. That's basically what it sounds like we're doing. The second thing we have to do is we have to thoroughly analyze the need and the situation. And I think there are a lot of ways to solve this if in fact it proves to be a substantial need that we have to fill. I've always said I think the best way to service our city would be to put a fire engine at the end of every street. Then you wouldn't have to worry. You could have everything you need there as soon as you need it. But we all know that there's a cost-benefit analysis that has to be determined. We can't put a fire engine at the end of every street. And I think before we move forward with this thing, we ought to understand, do we need a fire engine there? Do we need an ambulance there? Or does it need to be there? Does it need to be somewhere else? And we shouldn't be misled by this piece of property. Now, let me address the property first. This is not the first time this proposal has gone up the flagpole. The first question you have to ask yourself is, why is the developer giving us property? I mean, this is very valuable property, or could potentially be extremely valuable property. Why is he giving it to us? Well, the answer to that question seems pretty obvious. We're talking about, I keep using my terminology from up north, we're talking about swamp, okay? We're talking about wetlands. We're talking about designated wetlands. Now, converting those designated wetlands is a yeoman's project. And it's, as I said, it's been tried before and it failed. So the obvious reason to give a piece to the fire department would be what? We're going to use them as the lever to get this property approved so that we can develop it, okay? Now, in addition to that, at the other end of the property, you'll notice that they gave some parking places to the public. Ooh, I'm sure that's what the developer really wanted to do. He was concerned about the public going to the beach, okay? And at the other end of the property, he offers some parking for Bonita Bay, which again is playing people to try and get his project put through.
My understanding is only going to be six homes there, or 7 homes, or a small, as I recall. When
I'm
I
not
looked at
sure
it, was it
what the amount
didn't
is.
seem like it was a.
What are you saying?
I said it was my understanding that the way when I looked at it, there weren't going to be a large number of homes there. It was just a small number.
In between the two ends. At one end, they're going to put a fire station and some public parking. The other end, they're proposing to put some parking for Bonita Bay. In between, they didn't talk much about, but there's some lots there. And the question is, The big question is, how many lots can they put there? And this is what they need the fire department for. If we can break the ice for them, if we can go in and we can have some leverage with the environmental people and so forth that are going to let them develop this land through whatever means they've got planned to do, they stand to make a lot of money. And I don't have any problem with that because I'm a free enterprise guy. But the point is, we as a fire department are going to get dragged into the middle of this thing. And they're going to be sitting there saying, we're doing this for the fire department. We're doing this for the fire department. We're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for the fire department. Now, as I said, the land has been designated as wetlands. It's been designated to be preserved. It cannot be developed. And this is World War III that the chairman mentions when he says the folks on Little Hickory Island are going to hold you to the fire. Well, they are not going to let you develop that land. It's going to be a long, hard fight, perhaps, but it's not legal, and we won't allow it to happen.
Maybe we should have, Mr. Gilkey's here, maybe Mr. Gilkey would want to come up and address the board and fill in some of the blanks that maybe we're not, let's hear from him.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm trying to get ahead of her. Okay. The second half of it then is, what is the real need there? And I'm not so sure that I have seen numbers or anything that impress me that we really need it. And I don't disagree that we have some slow times out there. But are there other ways to solve that problem besides?
And that goes hand in hand with this issue, but maybe we could clear up some things, and maybe some things that are fact and some are fiction and we don't know.
Thank you. For the record, Dennis Gilkey. I'm not the developer, by the way, glad to say, but I am the broker for RYD International, who is the owner. The property, just to give you a little background, the property is a total of about a 90-acre piece of property, actually 95 acres, I think, that was part of the Ingleson estate, purchased by Bonita Bay Properties in the early 80s. In the 70s, the property was cleared and zoned for residential. It's today zoned RS1. There's about 37 acres of the property, the 90 acres is zoned RS1 today, which allows 75 by 100-foot lots. It is quite a bit of wetland there, extensive wetlands, mostly mangroves. There is a lot of berming and ditching, and that was done in the 70s. The property was cleared, it was ditched and bermed and filled for partial, because it was going to be part of the Carolines at that time. So the property today has 37 acres of RS1. The concept would be not, you can mention the word lever, but I use the word public-private partnering. That's basically what this would have to be for it to work. And so it's basically that the fire department would have a site. Yes, Bonita Bay Community Association might have a property for seasonal parking. It could be public parking as well. The property would have 6 residential lots. I think under the current RP, they could do 4. As it is today, I think you could do 4 lots there because you get 1 per 20 on the RP for the land use, but the zoning is RS1, so there's a little bit of conflict there with the zoning and the land use. But the idea would be to say, is there a way to do a public-private partnering where the fire department gets a site? And our assumption was that the water access would be maybe through the CenturyLink site, because this does not have water access on the property, so that would not be available. What would be part of the program would be to dedicate the remaining 85 acres or so to the state, to the city, to the county, to an environmental group, to mitigate. There was about, of that area that was cleared, all of the RS1, the 37 acres was cleared and zoned. This would be a total of about 7 acres of development area, if you will. So the remainder of the property would be mitigated, whether there's sufficient mitigation on site or off site. We haven't really, the owner hasn't really determined that yet. But there would be the dedication of the property all the way to Intrepid Waters, which is the main waterway into the Imperial River. The west side, the east side of Intrepid Waters is owned by the state of Florida. This would put all of that property into public ownership. So that would be part of the mitigation, is say there's an 85 acres that would be given up and put into conservation, and then areas that would be restored that were previously disturbed in the 70s and 80s.
There's no way to estimate mitigation costs at this point, then?
No, and so what had been proposed, what the owner had proposed is kind of a loosely worded agreement that said, if you're interested, let's go to the next steps. Some of that has to be determined. If you're not interested, well, then there's no sense of going any further. It's really, I'm not here to sell it to you. I'm just saying there's an opportunity here. If you have an interest in it, then I think there's an opportunity to do a public-private partnering that would hopefully be a win-win for the fire district, as well as some of the city and the owner as well, and Benny Bay Community Association as well. So, but that's the idea, is to put some kind of a program together that would satisfy the environmental requirements for mitigation, as well as, and the owner would be responsible for proceeding with those coming up with that plan and that permit concept. So, so that's pretty much it. I'd be glad to answer any questions. And Dave McKee is here from McKee Engineering. If you have questions, he would be
Just in a perfect world, and obviously we're not in one, if this were to go forward, what kind of a time frame will you be looking at?
I think it's a good couple years down the road to go through something like this. Probably 2.5 years to go through. And Dave, I don't know if you have anything to add. Yeah. So this is just a concept that says, hey, is this worth thinking about? Are you interested? If the answer is no or hell no, then that's fine. Well,
it depends on who you talk to.
We think it's an interesting concept, especially I think if you did work out your deal with CenturyLink, that it gives you a station as well as the boat access right together. Gives you a place where you could have a preempted signal at McLaughlin. It gives you, some of the things that make sense for a fire station, a full station. So, so that's really all I would add to it. And Dave, I don't know if there's anything else to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else have any more questions?
You're going to take some public comment on this?
At the end, yes, absolutely.
I did want to add something to this, sir, if I may. Now, when I say that the fire truck would be an ideal, that is specifically from a public safety standpoint, like I said, without all this other stuff involved, the politics in the neighborhood. However, the CenturyLink building, when we first started analyzing that was an opportunistic situation and still is in play, I believe. And that could satisfy not all, but some of the necessities for emergency response. Now, we talk about call load. That's a legitimate question. We run about 200 calls a year on the island. Now,
no, maybe Commissioner McCourt knows. I haven't heard anybody who's had a problem with the CenturyLink deal. You would probably have a better feel for that than I do, but I haven't had any pushback on that.
Oh, well, depends on what we park there, I think.
Right. But from what the plan is a light rescue and putting a boat on a lift out and back, and up until now, I have not heard. I've heard a lot of pushback already about a fire station down there. Yes, okay, but I have not. It just begs the question: are we still going to have that same World War III, whether we do the CenturyLink building or we do the firehouse? Because there's a need there.
Well, my feeling is that we don't even need the CenturyLink building. If you had an EMS unit down there, you can park it on the street anywhere.
Are you comfortable with the boat situation the way? Are you comfortable with the boat situation the way it is?
No, not yet. No. What I'd like to know, I'd like to have some analysis done, and I'd like to know how many of these boat rescues we actually have, and where they go, where they need to be.
Well, when there's a boat rescue, it's a mutual aid MERT response, and we go on every one. We may only have 3 in Bonita, but we're obligated to respond as part of the MERT emergency response. We all, from Sanibel to Iona to Estero, everybody, and they come here. So you may go, again, it may be a situation where the boat has to be in the water and whoever gets there first, fine, or they may get turned around because somebody got there and said, we've got this. But the response, whether or not anybody feels it's needed, it's dispatch. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief, but I know I'm not, because I've done a lot of work with this stuff. we all go. So whether you agree with that or you don't agree with that, that's the way it is. So
Well,
if somebody's off the lighthouse at Sanibel, we get dispatched to go.
I know how
on
it
the
is.
call, and
okay?
Richie
And
could-
I'm
Chief
just
Scott
saying
could-
that I think that somewhere along the line, well, somebody ought to sit down and figure out, do we need it? I mean, there's a lot
Well-
of things that are, but do we in fact need it? Now, you've got about at least 4 different agencies that parade up and down that river. Are we coordinating with them, or are we all going together every time, or?
Well, some of those agencies are there just to enforce laws. We're there, only,
Are they just
the only
riding-
time we're on the water
Are
is
they
to
just
save
riding
somebody.
up and down on the boat?
Well, I
Or
can
are
tell
they-
you that
are they
we wouldn't
on
respond
some
unless
sort
we
of a
needed it. I mean,
patrol
the reason why we go to these calls is
Sheriff's
because we're
Department
needed.
And in addition to that, I'm not so sure that depending on where these rescues are, I'm not so sure that that's the best location to leave a boat. There's a lot of other opportunities up and down that channel to put a boat. And if the rescues we're talking about are out in the Gulf, that's still a long ride to get to the Gulf.
Well, I mean, we get
And
rescues
why
in the
not-
backwater.
We can answer
get-
all these questions right now.
Go ahead.
Why shouldn't
If
we
Richie, you
have
wouldn't mind
a,
talking about the boat response, right now, we run approximately 52 boat rescue responses a year,
where?
all over the county, off of Sanibel, off of Iona, off of
Well,
Bonita
that's what I'm saying.
Springs.
This is not
Even
very
North
close
Naples.
to
I mean,
Sanibel.
we get called out. to-
No, but
You don't want to put
we
a
get-
boat on the lift on McLaughlin to respond to Sanibel.
absolutely you do, because it's a lot faster to get there by boat, and sometimes they're not exact locations.
Well,
So-
wouldn't we be better at Lover's Key?
Well, that's where we drop our boat in now. But it's quicker to get our boat out to the Gulf than to
That's-
trailer it all the way to Lover's Key.
Chief, that's the only question I'm asking. Let's
Yeah.
take a look at the stats, and let's decide where's the best place to put the boat. Then let's start looking for the place. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying instead of grabbing this because there's a boat dock there and saying we've got to build a fire station there because there's a boat dock there, I don't think makes a lot of sense. There's a
Commissioner
lot of-
Okay, I'll say this, because
Just one sec. Commissioner Forbes, you had something to add?
Well, yeah, I wanted to point out a couple things. That, number one, although I don't live on Hickory, I know some of the people, and whenever they've asked me about what we're going to put out there, and I've explained that if we were able to acquire or lease the CenturyLink building, that we would have a rescue vehicle that would be in the garage. The only major difference they would probably notice would be there would be a residential height flagpole beside the building someplace, because fire stations always have that, or stations. I've never gotten any real pushback on it, and the only thought I have on this whole thing is what I originally said. If and when we need a fire station there, we do have the money that we could buy a property. Now, will it cost more? Obviously, it's going to cost a lot more money, but I think it would go in there under the auspices that we're not stirring things up on Hickory Island, and I think it's the right way to do it. I think if we need a station, we should get a site, build a proper station, and I agree with the chief. If you need it, then you build a station. So all you have to do is justify it. I'm with you, would support it. I was, if you remember, did the thing to justify Station 6, and we could afford it. So I know we could afford a site that would be a proper site if we were going to build a station there. So that's what I think.
Well, the problem is that from years past, there's not many sites available, if
No.
any.
Mr. Chairman.
It probably means you're going to have to buy an existing home site and get rid of it, which is not going to be cheap, but that's, if you need
Commissioner
it, you need
Casella.
it.
To answer Commissioner McCourt's question, we have been researching this since I've been a commissioner. I think Richie and I and the chief and Greg, everybody's been down. We've been looking for sites. We've been trying to find a great location. This particular location answers a lot of questions. It gives us the speed and the time to get out to the areas in the Gulf that we need to be, much quicker than towing a boat all the way down to Lover's Key. It's we can have a rescue there that can get to medical emergencies much quicker than from Station 2 right now. And we have been working on this and researching where we could go, and this is an ideal site. So we have been researching this for quite a while.
And it doesn't seem like it, but I clocked it recently, and from the CenturyLink building to Station 2 on Mango is 1/10 of a mile short of 3 miles. It doesn't seem that way. And when you look at all the placement of our other stations around the city, we're within that parameter
Mhm.
of where the lines are drawn, where you actually, depending on population, of course, but where the lines are drawn, that's about how far our stations are apart.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I did want to say, and the reason why I said the fire truck again was, even when we do have the CenturyLink building, that's a great site. It is a great site. But we want to think back to the original discussion. If I have 3 firefighters on a rescue truck, okay, now, or I have an option to put 3 firefighters or 4 firefighters on an engine.
The rescue truck's going to be parked.
Well, first of all, which one, if you were
Well,
in charge and trying to decide who you would want to be able to respond to high-rise fires and everything else out there, would you rather have 3 guys on a rescue truck or 3 guys on an engine, or firefighters, to respond to everything?
All right.
I mean, logic would dictate, as somebody who has been doing this, extricating people, running fires, and all those other emergencies, that's what I would want. You know, now, if that's not palatable, then of course anything else would be better than it is now.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation, but I don't think
Yeah.
that, right now, that's the answer we
Correct.
have.
Mm.
But the boat is a very important part of this, and that location is ideal.
Yeah.
All right, so give me a direction here. What do you want to do about this?
What I'd like to do about it, I'd like to see a study done on the area that we're talking about, not necessarily by site, but by area. How many calls do we have
We've done that
going
already.
out on
Yeah.
Little Hickory Island?
We have that done already.
How often do they go out? What's the time frame? What's the time of the day they go out? And be able to put that into some, in the type of call, whether it's a medical call or it's a fire call or whatever.
Give or take, it's a couple hundred calls.
We
right?
run about 200 calls a year out of that, in that area on Hickory Island. About
Okay.
52 are boat rescues, and about 23% are between the hours of 10 and I believe 7 o'clock in the morning. That's 23%. That's when the ambulance isn't there also.
How many of them are medical calls?
Totally, I believe, well, the statistic for the district is 67, but I would have to look at those. I don't imagine that those would be much more different than probably 30% of our.
And what time of the day or night are they?
I believe they're between 10 and 7 o'clock in the morning was the 23%
But
of the
see,
calls.
here's where I have a problem with the time of the day. If somebody has a massive coronary or cardiac arrest, and it happens to be at 2 in the morning, but we haven't had any calls for a week at 2 in the morning, do we just let that guy die because he happened to have a heart attack at a time that we shouldn't, we don't feel like we should cover? I mean, it doesn't matter if there's 1 call or if there's 100 calls. It's somebody's life that we need to be at within, in our response parameters. And I mean, it doesn't matter.
I think we got 2 different issues. One issue is the CenturyLink building, which could be a rescue station and a boat. And then the other is, do you want to seriously pursue getting this 1.33 acres for a potential fire station site?
Well, like Mr. Gilkey had suggested, or he was on the thought of doing both. That's going to be pretty expensive to do both, just at first blush.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't think we're ready to make this decision.
No, I don't think we are either. We don't have enough information.
How about if we postpone to a date certain? Can I make that motion?
Well, we have to have a direction of, I know Commissioner McCourt just asked for a study, but it's done. We have those numbers.
Excuse me, do we have those numbers?
Yeah.
Has
Well-
anybody put together a study, or just?
Well, we did the PowerPoint that showed the response times, the call loads, in the PowerPoint that we presented with the station and where it is on McLaughlin, how long it takes to get to the end of Hickory, how long it takes to get to Lover's Key, how long the ride is from Station 2 to McLaughlin. So all
It takes
that,
7 minutes to go from
Seven
Station
minutes,
2
right.
on Mango to where the site is.
right.
It's 7 minutes from the station that we use now to get to the site that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So before you even go the rest of the way up Hickory, or if you have to go to the Dog Beach, or you have to go, it's 7 minutes just to get to that spot. So anything that we did there would trim 7 minutes, which is significant, off of any response time going north. It would take 7 minutes away. I mean, you don't need a study to understand that. The study is whether or not are we justified in spending money to do something to protect citizens that maybe don't want to be protected. I mean, even though it's our obligation to protect them, if the majority of the people down there don't want that extra protection, then I don't know how you fix that.
Okay, I'm not going to argue the hyperbole with you here, but we could put a doctor in
No, but
everybody's house.
the 7 minutes
you know.
is fact.
If money is not a factor, then we put a doctor in every house, and that's of course ridiculous. But the other thing I think we should look at is that Little Hickory Island is much larger than just the part that's in Bonita Springs or in the fire district. Should we look at some kind of a cooperative effort with North Collier in servicing that?
In servicing Hickory Island?
Yes. Don't they service the north end of the island? Or, excuse me, the south end of the island?
They go
So
into
Barefoot Beach.
Barefoot, yes.
The Barefoot Beach,
Yes, they do.
Only the part of Barefoot that's in Collier.
It's in Collier County, correct.
Why shouldn't we be talking to them about some kind of a mutual service for that whole strip of island?
It's in
all the
place
way
now.
from-
We
from
do have,
Marquise
Do
on
that
down.
now.
we do have that.
Closest
in
unit
place.
response, it's in place.
Yeah.
So we will be doing most of those calls then?
Well, we do all the calls on the, when you take Hickory and turn right before you get to the beach and go up north, we do all the calls in that area, and
So
even some.
you're currently doing Barefoot Beach?
I don't, are we currently, no, we don't, that's North Collier. Yeah, it's a mutual aid agreement.
I'm sorry, I'm not
It's a
understanding.
mutual aid agreement with Collier County. They run to Barefoot on the south end.
They go to Barefoot or we go to
Yeah.
Barefoot?
They do.
They do.
North Collier goes to Barefoot.
Why would they do that? Why wouldn't we be much closer if we build this station here?
If we build a station there?
Yeah.
If we build a station there, we could get into an agreement with them. In fact, what's happening now, and this is a whole nother project, is they're getting into closest unit response. They do not have closest unit response right now, so they're not on a computer. The dispatch can't see where they are, where our dispatch
Crosses
can.
county lines, which,
Cross county lines won't work.
So there's
However,
no dispatch vision over there is what you're saying?
right, we have it, we're ahead of Collier County in that respect, meaning they can't tell where their units are or what the closest unit is. We have that capability in Lee County, so if it's in Collier County, they're automatically going to dispatch a Collier unit, simply because they are responsible for Collier County. Now, if we are closer and they figure out that we're closer to a call, that can happen too, but that doesn't, they get the call through Collier Dispatch and they'll dispatch their unit. If they get the call through Lee County and it's in Collier, Lee County will dispatch us if we're close and dispatch or contact Collier County and dispatch them, depending on the circumstance. So it's a mutual aid agreement. Does that make sense?
Not really, but I'll talk to you privately about it. We don't
Okay.
have to take this time here.
so we can talk about this for another 2 hours. We still got to figure out where we're going with it, so.
Can I make a motion to table this to another meeting until we get some more facts?
I would propose that we make it a motion to postpone rather than a table. Because if you table it, you have to remove it from the table at the very next meeting. If you postpone
that's a
it to a
good
date
point.
certain, then you can do it again. Or if you postpone it to an unspecific time, then you can't bring it up again. So I
Why
would-
don't we, what do we need for a time frame?
We're not under some kind of a motion anyway, are we? Aren't we just having a discussion?
Right,
Well, we're
but,
proposing a motion to delay
Oh.
this, not talk about it anymore today.
Well, that's easy to do. Let's just talk about it at the next meeting.
Postpone, I'd like
Put it
to
on the
make a
agenda.
motion to postpone to the next meeting.
I second.
well, okay, now you get a second. I've got a question. What are we going to know at the next meeting that we don't know now?
Not too much.
So we need to pick a date certain where somebody's going to come forward with some more information and some more stuff that we can figure out, because if we're going to sit here for another hour and a half at next month's meeting having the same conversation, it's going to end at the same place. I'm not in favor of approving it.
We can have continuing postponements until we
Right.
get something from CenturyLink, perhaps.
Sure,
Okay.
but.
You can have it on the agenda and postpone it again.
Unfortunately, I think we're in a situation with the property at Merriman that if we don't approve this, the whole project dies. And that's the impression I'm getting out of this. I don't know if that's the case, but at first blush, it seems that if we go no, it kind of kicks the foundation out under this whole project. Now, if that's not true, then maybe Mr. Gilkey can correct me, but it seems to me that in order for this project to at least have some sense and mitigation and all the stuff that needs to be done when you cut, mangrove down,
Mr. Chairman?
I think that it probably were a large part of having that approved. Now, it all comes back again to if the people down there don't want it, even though we know that they need it, if they don't want it, then that puts us in a very bad position as administrative staff and as commissioners. It puts us in a very uncomfortable position because I guess it's not our place. We work for them, okay? And even though we know things that maybe they don't know because we've got information that maybe they haven't learned yet, but it's still, at the end of the day, if they don't want it, then even though we have an obligation to meet response times, even though they don't want it, I'm in a quandary here because I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time talking about something that all of a sudden there's going to be 400 people showing up at a meeting wearing red shirts and signing a petition and say, we don't want this because it solves nothing and it just creates more dissension in town. And that's the furthest thing from my mind. I think that if we're going to postpone this and talk about this, we have to meet with the people from Hickory. You guys have to meet with the people from Hickory. We have to have some informational meetings here where everybody comes from the beach and we have an open discussion about who wants what, who doesn't want what, and get a better feel of what the citizens of Hickory Island want. And then we can maybe go from there and make a decision. And I think maybe in January, after the holidays are over, we might want to schedule an informational meeting. Even if it's not on a board meeting night, we can schedule a special meeting. We invite everybody from Hickory. If 12 people show up, I don't care if we make 12 people mad. If 100 people show up, it got my attention, okay? Because you can get 12 people mad by serving a lunch that they don't like. So, if this is an important enough issue, it's an important issue to me, it's an important issue to the department. But we have to hear from those people that it's going to directly affect, and my suggestion is we schedule a special informational meeting and a question and answer meeting, and if Mr. Gilkey would agree to be here, and engineers and any questions so that we have everybody in the room that can make the decisions, and then at the end of the day, at the very next meeting, we put it on the agenda and we vote, yes, we're going to do this, no, we're not going to do it, and when this goes away.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may
sir.
I amend my motion to postpone this to the March meeting to give us time to do all of that?
I'd just like to say, Mr. Chairman, I totally agree with your thought. That's my direction I'd like to go into. I want to get more knowledge.
The only thing I
in the way
question
we-
is,
We
what- are
have
we
a
going to know
motion, we
more
need a
in
second.
March?
We have a motion.
Okay.
The
Do
motion
we have
was
a
to
second that
amend.
motion?
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So,
you're suggesting we schedule it on the March meeting and give us some time to have some information meetings?
Have a meeting.
now, do you want to do the informational meeting before that and make the March meeting where we make our decision?
Yes.
Do you want, I think that
I think
would,
that's
I'd be
the
in
best way.
agreement with that.
Okay.
So that either in January or February, or we can pick that date. We don't have to pick it now. We can get together with all the parties. We do a informational meeting in either January or February, because everybody's here. Anybody that's on Hickory Island, if they're not here in January, then we should probably have them committed, because it's cold where they come from. So everybody will be here, and I think that's the next step. I don't think we can make decisions for these people without hearing what they have to say. And if we have to make a hard decision, I think we have to know all the facts. And I think the March meeting should be the finish line where we vote on this, whether we're going to do this or not, and the informational meeting should be before that. Now, if that's part of that motion, then I'm totally for that.
Well, the motion stands as amended if we vote on it. I'll call the vote.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Okay, well,
All right, I'm 10% done.
what did I just say? No, I just,
It's an hour and a half.
okay. Are you done?
No, sir.
I'm glad we don't pay you overtime.
I actually think I am. I did forget something, so we're going to cue it if we can get the lights over there. Just as a point of reference, I wanted to bring up, if you'd go for the pictures, Greg. I wanted to show you some things, because when we talk about emergency response, I know we focus on EMS because it is a large part of what we do. But these are just some pictures of some of the calls we've ran in the not-so-distant past to show you that this is the kind of calls that we run aside from medical. And these are the things that I would hope that you would want me to be prepared for and the district to be prepared for. So if you continue, this is a boat fire. Of course, you can see two agencies. There's the police there. There's the sheriff's office there. Go ahead to the next one. There's our guys actually doing some work. Go ahead and continue. Of course, we're all familiar with this one, the interstate car wreck. This was a high-angle rescue. If you go to the next one, Greg, it shows where some window washers had a collapse. This is on Hickory Island.
What building is this, Chief?
This was, I think, the Ambassador. Which one? Yes. Silver what? Silver Sands. Yes, Silver Sands.
Now, if you're hanging on that scaffold, you care about that
Yeah.
extra 7 minutes, I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Is that a
They
condo?
did. They were painting, and the pulley gave out on the side, and they were hanging from there. So, okay. This is a hazmat call. Continue. This is a pull truck with a bunch of chlorine that spilled, and if you don't know, flammable chlorine is deadly. And when you have a car like that with sparks, and as you know, that's why fire is valuable. This is a recovery where you see where we had a high-angle rescue with our rope firefighters out there, and also the boat. Go ahead, continue. This was the structure fire we had within the last week. I think it was last weekend, wasn't it? That's the inside. These are all, like I said, recent calls. And there's the call where the car went through the restaurant, and I believe we had 14 people, Greg, was it? How many were transported? So like I was saying before, this is a potential gas leak, possible structural collapse issue, obviously a mass casualty incident with multiple units involved. So, continue. There's another picture of the car, of course. And we know this one that's happened on, this was on Quails West. Continue. God bless you.
Bless you.
And there's the high-angle recovery, we'll call it. And there's a structure fire in Pelican Landing. I think that was the longest away. That was a year ago or so. But that was, and there's
It's only been
rescue
like
a dog.
8 or 9 months ago.
Yeah, 8 or 9 months ago. So, and there's, of course, a delivery of a baby in a parking lot. That was cute. But there's a tractor-trailer rollover. Everybody knows where that is, at the corner of Beach Road and 75. Next page. Obviously, you can tell that's not a great situation. Continue. Okay, so I just wanted to reiterate that that is what we're prepared to handle, aside from the medicals. And it gives you an idea. And that is all that I have.
Jeez. Assistant Chief DeWitt, you don't have anything, do you? Okay.
You know I can't be left out. The only thing I have is doing some analysis. We are about 600 calls greater than we were this time last year. So last year about this time we were at 5,100. Now we're at 5,700. So call load is increasing. So I just wanted the commission to be aware of it, and I'll have more in January.
Thank you. And Deputy Chief Giuliano's report is attached if he has anything.
Yeah, I don't
to
have
add.
anything else.
Deputy Chief, I even hate to call his name, Rich Scott.
Yes, I do have something.
I knew
but
you would.
But I'm gonna. Well, I was looking for a cue from the chief, and he wanted me to
Go ahead.
It'll be quick.
I'm just kidding.
I promise.
I am just kidding.
We're gonna play a little video. It's just the fire the other day. It's a quick summary.
We'd like to thank our on-scene reporter, Commissioner Casilla, for the footage.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't charge much.
It's not very long. I don't like to talk over the videos because then you won't follow it. So you get the idea. Really, all I wanted to do is briefly highlight the fire. This is a very routine, single-family home structure fire. 3:15 in the morning, I believe it was Sunday morning after Thanksgiving, the 29th. And, it looks impressive, and we go on sometimes about these things, but I showed up on this fire, and it was, for our world, it was somewhat routine. We showed up with 16 firefighters, 4 apparatus, 3 engines, the truck, and a battalion chief and myself. I came in a little bit later after the battalion chief called me. Anyway, they did an initial attack. Oh, and Commissioner Casilla, excuse me, sir. I know you were there. Vice Chairman Casilla, you were there when I got there. Yes, sir. He beat me there. He let me know, for sure. So we had an initial crew come in. They did fire attack. They did search. They cleared the structure. The flames were already through the roof of the garage. So it was all through the attic. And then the battalion chief, ironically, it was our captain, our new Captain Madden. He was the acting battalion chief, did an excellent job on that call. But once it got in the attic, there was some indications there were some hazards and gasoline, excessive gasoline in the garage. And once we cleared the structure that there was no one in it, what you saw was the defensive mode. So we removed everyone to keep them safe because the roof started falling and things were coming down on them. But again, ventilation was done and pretty routine. We had MAC coverage for the district, which the chief mentioned earlier, mutual aid coverage. That was all automatic. I was there 12 minutes after it started, and all these things were in place and done. So it was good, and the commissioner had it well under control. But that was it. I just wanted to kind of
It's not
mention.
going to be any living with him, no, I know that.
Those happen. Those happen on a regular
It's all
basis.
hat. It's all
And it took just about when we discussed NFPA standards, we had the 16 people there, and everything fit into place. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comment?
Do you need this back? Okay, thank you. My name is Marty Roach. I want to thank you all for letting us speak. I actually live on Hickory Island, directly across the street from this property that Mr. Gilkey's tried to develop. I'm also president of the Bonita Beach Alliance, and we do have over 400 members that would be here and would stand up and complain about this because we don't want to see that land developed at all in any way, shape, or form. Not just because I live across the street, but because the majority of people in the island feel the same way. We don't need any more development down there than we have. As far as the issues are concerned, last Thursday, Jack Clausen, who's my neighbor, and I was supposed to go to lunch with him, fell down the steps. And when I arrived there, he was semi-conscious at the bottom of the steps. He was in a pool of blood. I immediately called 911. Within, I would say, 6 or 7 minutes, there was a response to that door. And that door, and if you know where he lives north of McLaughlin. There was a fire truck and an ambulance that came, and they surveyed the situation and took them down to north. But the problem, the point I'm trying to make is that they were there in a very, very, very reasonable time. The issue that we have down on the beach is season. The people on people actually on the south part of Fort Myers Beach, they all come off our beach in season, and it blocks the road up continually. I don't personally feel we need another fire station down there, but I do believe we need something down there, particularly in season, for the ambulance to get to people because there's no way to get there. There's cars everywhere down there. 2 years ago, when it first started even getting worse, there was an accident there, and my wife and I were walking down the sidewalk. There were so many people that were going to the airport, and they kept saying, "How do I get out of here? I said, "You can't. You're going to miss your flight. You can't turn around and go back up the other way, and you can't go this way. You're going to miss your flight. There's nothing else you can do." So I personally feel, and I think, and by the way, if you wanted to find out about our 400 people, I have emails of all these people, and we'd be happy to send a survey out to them all and get a response back so that you could find out
Sure.
what people really want and what they don't want on our
The only
island.
thing I would like to interject about, you said that we were on scene in 7 minutes, which I think we said that it was a 7-minute response time from Station 2 to, but the average medical call in Bonita right now, we're under 5 minutes. Just
Well, I mean, I wasn't sitting there,
under
I wasn't sitting there
No,
clocking it.
but we can look that up. I mean,
Okay,
that dispatch does that. But the thing is, it begs the question, in an emergency, and these guys can answer that better than I can, but 7 minutes for medical response time plus a minute of rolling out is unacceptable
Okay.
by anybody's standards.
Getting to that point, I believe that we could use in season, we could use an ambulance down there full-time, someplace that we could put it. You were talking about the CenturyLink building. I don't think you would have I don't think people down there would have a problem with the CenturyLink building used for that purpose. I think there's also some other places on the island that could be checked into and maybe even utilized, but I think the CenturyLink building
Well,
would be...
with your email list and your contacts on Hickory,
Mhm.
if anybody down there has suggestions of things that maybe we're not aware of, I mean, you guys are,
I have someone that might have a couple suggestions after I'm finished here. But
anyway, it's, if there's property and boat docks and other options, I mean, we're not zeroing in on one spot,
Okay.
but we have one that's available, so.
Right. Well, as far as Mr. Gilkey's property, though, I know there will be a rash of people that would not only object to it, but they would fight it to the bitter end.
I've gathered that already.
You know that. The other thing I was going to mention to you is, let me just make one thing here. That's what I was just going to tell you. The opposition that people have toward you all being there is not really an opposition as far as we don't want you down there, we don't want you helping us out, we don't want your services. I mean, everybody needs that. But I'm pretty aware that things in the past, and my neighbors, one has been there since 1955 and the other one's been there since 1960. And they've seen that place grow and I've asked both of them about the thing, and they said they don't see any need for it. They do. They're elderly now. They both feel like they should have an ambulance available closer by. And I think that's the thing that you will definitely get no opposition from whatsoever.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for postponing this until March, because I think you're going to find a lot of input from our people.
Well, believe it or not, we're here to work for you, and we want to make this. We want to do our job, but we also don't want to do our job by bullying our way into the neighborhood either. So I mean, it has to be a partnership of the residents down there and the job that we're obligated to do. And somewhere we've got to try to reach some kind of an agreement. And with your help and with this cooperative board and administration, I'm sure we can reach that point.
I appreciate that very
Thank you.
much. Thank you for your time.
Any more public comment?
And I'm Dawn Konsikowski, and thanks for postponing it till March. Really, thanks so much. Someone mentioned the mutual aid agreement. I know in Lee County, in their comp plan, it does say that they have a mutual aid agreement with Collier County, and the Collier County firehouse is just down off Vanderbilt, right? Is that correct? So just a thought. Also, the north end of Hickory Island has its community facilities, has a boat ramp just north of Big Hickory Island, and it has a parking lot there. It's public. Lee County owns it. And that's a spot where you could...
It's not deep enough.
It's not
we've
deep
looked
enough?
at that. It's not deep enough for our boat.
And in addition, Lee County is working with the state of Florida on Big Hickory Island to be able to put facilities in there, various facilities. They're working with the state right now, and they have a whole plan drawn up. It might be a good idea to check with them also. As far as the telephone company building, I think that's a great idea for an ambulance. It still is a deed-restricted parcel, but they did have a public hearing when the telephone company went in there, and as long as they just had one truck parked there,
Right.
I have the zoning variance that they got for that. And I think that would be good. A couple things I just want to straighten out that Mr. Gilkey mentioned. He said that it was RS1 zoning there. The comp plan is wetlands, though. And when there's a conflict between zoning and the comp plan overrides it. He can put 4 houses there on the 100 acres. And he said that he would be donating the other 80 acres. Well, he doesn't donate them. He can't use the other 80 acres
Right.
because he can only put 4 houses there, 4 houses there.
I think the proposal that we saw showed 6 houses, but I
Yeah,
think
he
that was
said he was going to
because-
try to get more.
Right, but the plan was to have a frontage road alongside of Hickory, and then the houses actually facing the bay, with all the trees blocking the houses from the Hickory side. But that's the
Yeah.
the conceptual plan.
And just, because someone mentioned maybe tearing down a house and doing something, that is a deed-restricted community. Where you're proposing putting it is in the heart of a residential area. At the south end or at the north end, where there's already commercial uses, those would be the places. There's county property at both ends that, would be good to look at, I think, in addition, if you wanted a firehouse.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Commissioner
or a
For-
fire truck.
Commissioner Forbes had a,
Is that discrepancy, is that one of those Scribner areas that I've heard about? Where they're
No,
shown
that's
on the
where,
land use
that's where they
plan?
haven't brought the zoning map up to date with the comp plan, because the future land use map is incorrect. Yeah, that's one of them,
And you've requested it be changed and brought.
for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
yeah.
how's that working out?
It has-
Okay, but as far as the telephone company building, I read the zoning variance that they had for that, and an emergency vehicle there would be awesome. I
Thank
think.
you very much.
Okay, thank you, and thank you
Thank
again
you.
for
Okay.
postponing this.
Any,
And if they did put a firehouse in there, it would be World War III, and there would be an army on our side.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public input?
One thing I would mention is that if there's going to be an ambulance at that facility, it wouldn't be our choice, it would be Lee County's choice.
Well, I think we're talking about a rescue
We're talking
unit,
rescue unit, not
paramedics, rescue unit.
They were talking about ambulance.
Just
Right.
saying name of the.
Well, if we have nothing else, I think we ought to go home. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
I'm in the drinking now.